how to change someone's mind and maybe even your own. Experience shapes what we believe. Most people believe they are smart enough to know what is going on. However, we are not experts at analyzing our experiences, and this is why we embrace numerous mistaken notions. We are capable of feeling confident about a number of things that are just not so. Irrational, illogical thinking? That is what other people do, or so we might tell ourselves. Have you considered the implication that we had to invent the scientific method because human beings cannot see truth simply by trusting how smart we are? We had to develop methodologies that keep us from jumping to erroneous conclusions. Science, when done right, works because without it, we don't. So, how do we get stuck in a place that makes it hard to change minds in the face of evidence, reason, and logic? Now, for general ideas and insights, reason, logic, and evidence are sufficient. But can we learn to identify which of our opinions might be nonsense? And how do we persuade others to abandon the nonsense they firmly believe? Well, to do that, we need to examine the psychology of strongly held opinions. Strongly held opinions are not developed or sustained primarily by rational thinking. They aren't, even when they are correct. The reasonableness of a notion is not what makes an opinion strong. 2 plus 2 is 4. I do not strongly believe that 2 plus 2 is 4. As far as I'm concerned, it just is. I do not get emotional about it. I feel no need to defend my simple math. If someone wanted to argue about it, I'm not impressed. Not everything we strongly hold to is thereby false, but our mistaken opinions, more often than not, are hiding behind a variety of strong attachments. When you or I acquire a strongly held opinion, those opinions got that strong because, well, right or wrong, they also became connected to things like our identity or to our unconscious insecurities, maybe to our social bonds or our reputation or our moral reasoning. We can be misled by our epistemic trusts, our emotional burdens, and to our previously costly commitments. We feel the need to protect ourselves from past traumas, and we embrace narratives that explain our lot in life. These are all forms of what we call motivated reasoning. There's no such thing as a strongly embraced opinion that is merely the result of being rational or logical. Motivated reasoning makes us hold particularly fast to certain opinions. Reason and logic, when it comes to strongly held opinions, can be an afterthought used to protect our embraced point of view rather than to seek out any possible errors. Motivated reasoning is not a praiseworthy thing. Motivated reasoning has more to do with rationalizing than being rational. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that a genuinely rational thought can't also be held onto through rationalizing. We can be doing both. Daniel Dennett said, "There's nothing I like less than bad arguments for a view that I hold dear." I've often said that being rational is something human beings are capable of on occasion, and when it doesn't really cost too much. Just because we feel strongly about something does not mean we are wrong. But when we are wrong, and yet reluctant to see that, it is due to our difficult to counteract motivated reasoning. Consequently, it is not easy to successfully challenge someone's strong opinions attached to one or more of these previously mentioned motivated reasoning dynamics. Reason and evidence alone cannot do it. This is because regardless of what reasonable evidence we might be asked to consider, the glue that bonds us to our strong opinions is not formulated with reason or evidence, even if we are correct. Motivated reasoning exaggerates the bond. To successfully change what someone strongly believes takes time. It takes patience. We need to understand and respect how this cognitive glue that we all use causes us to remain deeply invested in our opinions, irrespective of their accuracy or lack thereof. It is a rare person so self-disciplined that they are open to exploring the various glues used to hold fast to their opinions. Fortunately, people who have experienced a significant paradigm shift at some point know something about the psychology of a changed mind. They know it was not reason and evidence alone that brought about their change. They came to break the charm of the specific attachments that had kept them from changing their mind, and they're more open to changing again. So I would like to consider with you several common dynamics that must be faced when challenging how you or how someone else thinks. Everyone has an identity. Everyone has a sense of who they think they are, regardless of if that sense is poorly formed, well formed, or most likely something in between. More than we at first realize, our important opinions get woven into our identity. Changing our mind on significant matters places us momentarily in a condition of not being sure about who we are or where we belong. As social beings, that is an awkward feeling, one we try to avoid, and when we cannot avoid it, we tend to try to hide it. Therefore, when hoping to change someone's mind, we need to consider that we might be seen as attacking their personally precious identity. Changing how they think can change who they think they are. And so we must tread carefully, with empathy, kindly, and respectfully. This is not easy to do, especially if the opinion we are hoping to challenge is one we find deeply offensive. No one will allow you to change their mind if they do not feel genuinely respected by you at some level. This is not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. If you can't respect how someone you differ with got to where they are, you do not really understand them, nor do you know what it will take to change their mind. It is even possible you do not want to understand them, and so who are you to be persuading them to think differently? But identity is just one of many glues that attach us to our opinions. As social beings and as biological organisms, we have several known and unknown vulnerabilities. This creates in us, all of us, insecurities that we may or may not be aware of. No one can easily change their mind when doing so makes them feel increasingly vulnerable, especially when they're not really sure why they feel vulnerable. People need to feel that they and those they love are safe. They want to expect that changing their beliefs will not expose them to harm. Let's be clear. People do not automatically evaluate arguments for correctness. Even the most disciplined critical thinkers must confront their own counterproductive motivated reasoning. People prefer to evaluate notions, values, and beliefs in ways that protect their prior investments in life's lessons. To change our mind over something important is to violently break with our past and can call into question what we regard as meaningful. When we change how we think, someone else we know might feel betrayed. A changed mind can disrupt precious relationships. A changed mind can create regret over past choices. Changing our mind about strongly held options cannot be done frivolously. There's much more to motivated reasoning. When we are presented with alleged evidence contrary to our beliefs, we unconsciously filter it through our goals, such as the status we desire to preserve or attain. We also prefer to appear morally consistent. If I change my mind, it means I was wrong. Our ego dislikes the thought. Maybe I was terribly wrong. Sometimes that realization is uncomfortably embarrassing. Furthermore, we are concerned with various group loyalties, and so assessing the validity of a significant change in perspective requires far more than simply considering its validity. Being confronted over strong opinions without dealing with possible motivated reasoning dynamics is more likely to cause a person to dig in their heels with even greater motivation. You've probably seen people do that. Part of being human involves a sense of belonging to various social groups and holding an acceptable reputation within those groups. Groups demand a certain degree of philosophical conformity to remain in good standing. Changing our mind involves risking our reputation with the very people we are most connected to. You see, opinions are much more than articulated perspectives. They are public signals. And so changing one's mind can mean a loss of standing in a peer group, or risking ridicule, or worse, moral condemnation. Changing our opinion can force us to rework the continuity of our own narrative. Am I still the same person? How will others I care about change towards me when they discover I'm now sending out very different signals? Opinion revision can be costly, even when we are already deep in dissonance. Let's discuss morality. It should not surprise you that people do not agree on what is right and wrong. We differ in what we think of as harm, fairness, loyalty, proper authority, and sanctity. Arguments that violate our moral perspective will feel obviously wrong regardless of factual accuracy. Changing our strongly held opinions can produce an awkward lack of moral clarity. Changing our mind can sometimes make us doubt if we have been a good person. Then there is the issue of epistemic trust. People accept claims from sources they trust, not from sources that are merely correct. Politically, if you trust Fox News, you don't trust MS Now, and vice versa. If you trust sources that those you challenge don't trust, your arguments are discounted before receiving a fair evaluation. Epistemic centers of trust create difficult to cross boundaries. The wisdom here is that those who hope to change others should avoid arguing from sources that fly in the face of someone else's epistemic trusts. Oh, well, Fox News said, oh, I heard on MSN Now that, you're spitting into the wind. We become emotionally settled in what we strongly believe. People engaged in a conversation that challenges their thinking can begin to feel anxious, angry, insulted, or threatened. Their minds narrow and their attention defaults to their habitual arguments. They will be so busy coping, they become incapable of considering. Under threat, people seek emotional certainty, not thoughtful nuance. Persuasion fails when the nervous system is emotionally dysregulated. Consequently, when trying to change someone's mind, lighten up if they become emotionally triggered. If they discover you to be someone who backs off when they feel provoked or attacked, they're more likely to eventually re-engage with more openness. See, opinions are not isolated collections. Opinions become embedded in artificially coherent stories about how the world works and who we are in it. Facts that disrupt the coherence of anyone's personal narrative will be rejected without a workable replacement story. And so, since we all live in a prison of narrative, do not expect anyone to abandon a narrative without having an alternative they can safely embrace. I hope you see that when it comes to strongly held opinions, the cognitive structures that keep them stable can be formidable obstacles to change. So, how do we do this? If the goal is to genuinely change what someone else thinks, you need more than just a rhetorical victory. You must address and nurture at least 3 layers simultaneously to help dissolve their motivated reasoning. First is psychological safety. You need to reduce what might seem like a threat to their identity and opportunity to belong. Second is they need to become open to widening their epistemic trusts. That means more than switching to the other side. You should hope they will instead consider a variety of biased and less biased, maybe balanced in a variety and unbalanced in a variety, but more highly nuanced sources. And third, it requires narrative scaffolding. What does that mean? Well, they need to see they can change the story of their life in a way that preserves their dignity. Convincing someone they have been an asshole is not usually winsome. This means that when changing how someone else thinks, counterintuitively, reason and logic cannot be all you rely on. And above all, it is essential to be genuinely calm, composed, and pleasant. I find that hard. What is the practical and effective approach? When possible, affirm values they hold without being patronizing. Recognize that character is more closely related to sincerity in one's beliefs than in the beliefs themselves. After all, if reality really is what we think it is, then we should think the way we do. But we do not live in reality. We live in narrative and perspective. This means integrity is actually based on honesty about embracing a narrative or a perspective, not on the perspective or narrative itself. Therefore, others will feel safe when they change their mind, when they can see change as a form of consistency concerning personal integrity. That way, at all times, they are being faithful to reality. They simply now are seeing reality differently. That justifies a change. After all, we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. And very importantly, avoid language that implies they suffer from moral or intellectual inferiority. You're an idiot. You know, even when people are wrong, they hold to wrong beliefs because they think that is the right thing to believe. They're not intentionally throwing morality out the window and embracing stupidity for the hell of it. Give them credit for coming to their point of view in a way they believed was honest. You do not need to question their values as much as you question how they arrived at a particular value. This is easier to genuinely convey if you can identify shared values and concerns. And here's a difficult thing to do. As much as possible, frame your argument in terms of their moral compass instead of yours. This is like the ancient art of Aikido. The Aikido martial arts expert does not fight or struggle. They redirect the energy and motion of their attacker. It causes the attacker to bring themselves down. It might not make sense right now, but the basic moral compass of the one whose mind you hope to change holds the most powerful energy in redirecting their thoughts. This is a process of helping someone else explore the options so as to discover for themselves a new perspective they can genuinely prefer. Rather than spewing out facts that prove they are wrong, save those facts as if they were afterthoughts. It is nearly impossible to get anyone to go from yes to no or from no to yes in one fell swoop. Instead, focus on questions like, you seem very certain to me. Do you have any idea what could get me to agree with you and get me to feel just as certain? follow that with a long pause. If they answer, encourage them to expand on it. When people expand on their thinking, they are more likely to begin seeing some problems with how they put things together. Another question. What would count as evidence that could change your mind? Another long pause. That question gets asked a lot, and so it might not be as powerful. If there were evidence that should change your mind, given your certainty, do you believe you would be able to see it for what it is? I'm just curious. Are you sure it would be that easy? Point out and then empathize with the costs they might face if they change. Ask, how did you come to trust that source? Encourage them to share the long version story and how they developed trust in various sources. As they share their long story and you listen with interest, they might hear themselves say things they suddenly realize are problematic, but they will try to pretend neither you nor they heard it. When they do, simply smile. That might give them pause later. And here's another question. What would concern you most if in the future it turned out you are wrong? And for the sake of argument, what other problems or issues might that also provoke for you? The purpose of asking such questions as these and others is to get them to map out their belief structure as it pertains to motivated reasoning without attacking it. Later, away from you, some of those questions will come back to haunt them. But now, these are questions they are asking themselves, and that makes them far more powerful questions. When you have made significant progress in having respectful, more open discussions, this is a good time to introduce doubt without demanding a conclusion. Highlight what it is for them internal tensions of potential dissonance, rather than your point-blank refutations. After all, you should be guiding them to think for themselves, not to think like you do. Your goal here with these questions is a productive discomfort, not a collapse of the self. People at this point are more comfortable making the leap if it seems they have a face-saving exit. They're not a fool for having thought the way they used to. On the contrary, as I said earlier, if reality really was the way they used to see it, then their opinions and ideas are exactly what reality would call for. It is their perspective that was wrong, not their response to their perspective. Let me say that again. It was their perspective that was wrong, not their response to their perspective. They are mostly wrong about reality, not about so much on how to respond to reality. Let them see that changing is just a form of their ongoing effort to respond appropriately to reality. That secures their dignity. As I said earlier, this is a process. It takes time. This might require months of civil discussions. Know when to disengage. Know when to chat about fluff and have a fun moment. Share a funny story. Laugh together. Enjoy a meal. There's a sense that since their beliefs were serving crucial and necessary psychological functions, identity, stability, trauma management, social survival, that is when confrontational persuasion could be both unethical and futile. Think about it. You cannot reason someone out of a position that is for them socially rewarding, emotionally protective, and identity defining. But what you can do is create conditions in which reason becomes usable again as a way of underpinning their new cognitive glue. And let me leave you with some very strange advice. Acquiring strongly held opinions is probably unavoidable, but they're not as helpful as it might seem. Having strongly held beliefs can be a dangerous state of mind. Opinions do not serve anyone well when held on to with white knuckles. You can develop the preference for holding on loosely, treating your perspective as an exploratory work in progress, fully capable of containing surprises and flexibility. That will make you someone others can more easily approach and possibly change your thinking when that would be entirely appropriate. You can learn to be comfortable with an identity that is a flexible mystery, open to exciting changes. You don't need to know exactly who you are. You don't know exactly who you are. And you don't need to remain who you have been either. You can learn that insecurities are just a natural and inescapable fact of life. They're not necessarily predictors of a doomed existence. Your social bonds are important, but you need not sell your soul in unconditional loyalty to anybody or any group. Real friends are those who still like you even when you see things differently. Get over yourself and your righteousness. It is totally okay that you have not fully figured out right from wrong in every question. And keep weak epistemic trust. You do not need a hero or a dependable source worthy of your unending loyalty. Be honest when you are overwhelmed or confused. This is not a time to draw firm conclusions, to reinvest, or to dig in, or to make life-changing decisions. Allow yourself to heal from the traumas of the past. Don't just move on. Face the trauma and heal. You can do it. Allow the narrative of your life to be as much a comedy as a drama, as a mystery, as occasional mistakes, as a story of many changes. Laugh at your foolishness and at your mistakes. You will learn so much more when curious about what went wrong instead of coping with a bruised ego. You are a story, and the final chapter is a long way off, and you will most likely die before the story comes to a coherent, all tied up plot. In other words, learn to disarm all the dynamics that strengthen irrational motivational reasoning. Be free enough to go with the flow. All those dynamics that create motivated reasoning are not really all that helpful. They can actually cause you to lose yourself. And above all, love yourself and love those you disagree with.